Okay, so the first thing we'll do is answer your question on stretch. And I think so. The first question you had was you're having trouble with your units. Is that right? Because you would hit S for stretch, and then you would go. I'll just come down here. You would go to stretch something, and you would move in the direction you want to go. Right? You type in something, and like 15, enter, and nothing would happen. Is that right? So what is happening with you is that you likely, I think you're in decimal units. Because if I do the same thing, S for stretch, enter, click, move in the direction I want to go, and I type in 15, enter, do you see nothing happened essentially? So, well, something did happen there actually. Oh, you know what it is? Hold on a second. I didn't type in the foot mark. So when you type in the foot mark, it won't recognize the dimension, right? So let's see, did this happen with you? If you type in something like 5 with the foot mark, see the foot mark I have right there, and oops, I was in architectural there. We want to be in decimal. Okay, 5 foot, and if I hit enter, nothing happens. And it shows me right here in my command line, it says invalid point. Is that what's happening with you?
Mine would just quit. It wouldn't even say invalid point.
What do you mean it would just quit?
It would just like exit out of the stretch command.
Do you have it on your screen right now?
No.
Okay. So you go S for stretch, enter, you grab something to stretch, enter, click, move in the direction you want to go. You see this happening?
Yes.
Okay, you see this happening, and then you type in an increment and hit enter. So if you type in something and you hit enter, is it working on your screen now?
I'm still trying to pull it up.
Okay.
Cat comments wasn't.
So if this right here is happening, you're getting the preview, and you type in a number and hit enter, and it exits out of the command. I mean, I would likely think that something happened on your screen, and then maybe you just didn't get the increment that you wanted. If you hit like 15 foot enter, and then it's just kind of stuck in here, like 15 foot enter, and it's just kind of stuck, that means that you're working in the wrong units here. What's that?
It could have been. I don't.
Is it?
Remember what units I was using.
Okay. So maybe just look at that. Maybe, so if your units are not showing up right here, you can go to customization and you can turn units on that direction, right? And you can also type here, you can type units at the command line and hit enter. And you can see here that it shows architectural or decimal. You can change it right there as well. And just make sure that it actually happened, if that makes sense, right? You know, sometimes if you change it, and maybe if you hit undo or something and you go undo one too many times, it could undo the unit change. And so you thought you changed it, but then you hit undo, and then it re-changed it to where it was not supposed to be. So try that out and see what happens. But those are the telltale signs, right? If I hit S for stretch, I grab it, enter, click, and I move. You know, it's working, but if I type in the wrong unit, 15 foot, enter, nothing happens, but I'm still in the command, then the units are wrong. If I type in 15, enter, you see it may not give me the right increment of measurement, right? But at least something happened. Okay. Any other questions on anything? Okay, good. Well, everybody seems to be doing pretty well on their assignments. Let's go back to Paperspace then. So like I said, it somehow, the sound didn't work on the video that I posted. So I'm going to go over, I was planning on anyway going over a few things in that same video today. Okay, so let's talk about Paperspace, and I think I'll cover some of the things from that video anyway today. Okay, so just a little bit of a review with regard to Paperspace, right? Right now we're looking at model space, right? Model space is where we draw, okay? And I know that I'm in model space because I can come down here in the bottom left-hand corner and I can see that when I click on that model space tab, there I am, okay? To enter Paperspace or Layout 1, I click on Layout 1 and here I am in Paperspace. Okay, Paperspace, you see when you enter it, a physical / digital piece of paper happening, right? This piece of paper by default, when you just open up a blank AutoCAD drawing, is an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper, right? That's a letter size, okay? The reason that we have model space and we have paper space is because from now on, model space is where I'm going to be drawing, okay? And paper space is where I'm going to be printing, all right? And you can you say, well, you know, in model space I can print too, and that's true, but it has a lot of limitations that we need to sort of overcome, okay? So in model space, I can print anything I want, but really I'm limited to 1 scale per page. So if I wanted to print this tree at 1/2 of an inch is equal to a foot, and this eave detail at 1/4 of an inch is equal to a foot, and I wanted them on the same page, I couldn't achieve that in model space unless I printed them on different pieces of paper, all right? However, in Paperspace, the nice thing about Paperspace is that I can create what we call viewports, and I can view the drawings in model space from Paperspace, and I can create layouts on this page that allow me to scale objects differently, essentially, right? That's kind of the perk of Paperspace here, okay? And that's the main advantage, okay? So model space we draw, Paperspace we print, okay? So a couple things about Paperspace. Number one, we're going to talk about the page size today and how we can change that. I'm going to go back over how we get drawings onto our Paperspace, okay, and make sure you understand that, all right? So right now this is my physical piece of paper in AutoCAD, and I can use the distance command and I can sort of measure it to get an idea of how big it is. So while I'm in Paperspace, I can type DIST, enter, and I can just guess and get very close to the edge of the page, press F8, click, and I see that it's 11 inches, right? I'm going to measure again in this vertical distance, and just about 8.5. So we know that this is an 8.5 by 11, okay? So in a second I'm going to talk about how we can change this to something like maybe an 11 by 17 or a 24 by 36, okay? And then I'm going to talk about how you can create settings in AutoCAD so you have these preset page sizes that you just apply to the page and all the settings change to what you want it to be, okay? All right. Before we get to that, I want to talk about viewports one more time, okay? So viewports are what allow us to cut a hole inside of our Paperspace, right? We get out our scissors, we cut a hole in this piece of paper, and when we cut that hole, we can view the drawings behind in model space, okay? Viewports achieve that for us, all right? The thing about viewports, we talked about this last time, is that while viewports are objects in AutoCAD, and while we do put them on a layer, which we'll talk about in a second again, we don't want those viewports to print. And we don't want them to print because they could be mistaken for something else in AutoCAD, right? If you have a little house drawn in AutoCAD and then you put a viewport around it and the viewport prints a solid line around the house, it could be mistaken for a concrete pad or a property boundary, right? Or something that it really isn't, and then it can cause trouble in the construction phase of the project, okay? So we're going to create these viewports. They are going to be objects in AutoCAD, and we are going to create a layer to put them on that is set to not print, all right, because we don't want them to print. So I'm going to come up here to Layer Properties. I'm going to click on that, and I am going to come over here to Create a New Layer, New Layer. I'm going to call this viewport, enter, okay? It doesn't matter what color it is because I'm going to set it to not print, all right? So viewport, and I'm going to click on this little printer right there that makes this a non-printable layer, all right? Now, one thing we want to remember is that if we go to create another secondary new layer, which I just did, I can change this to, you know, call it new layer, whatever. But one thing I want you to notice is that because the previous layer that I generated called viewport, I set it to not print, the next layer that I generate copies the settings from the previously created layer, right, including the non-printable status. So when you are working in AutoCAD, you create a new viewport layer so that your viewports don't print, and then you create several new layers after that for walls, doors, windows, whatever, right? Just make sure that you uncheck that little not print right there, because if you don't, you'll go and you'll draw your geometry, you'll set up your Paperspace to print, you'll go to print, and hey, guess what? Nothing prints. And it's not that it's not there, it's just that it's set so that you can't print it, okay? Okay, so this is going to be one thing you're going to have to do on your assignment, because if I see viewports printing, then you lose points, okay? And they're just really easy points to miss, and I don't want you to do that. So create your viewport layer, make it non-printable. Okay, I'm going to change my current layer to viewport all the way down here at the bottom. And we're going to create some viewports now, okay? So there's two ways that we can create viewports. I'm going to click on this layer tab here, or excuse me, layout tab. And we have the ability under layout viewports to choose, the method of creating your viewport. So do we want it rectangular? Do we want it to be a polygon or an object shaped? Okay. I'm going to click on rectangular. I'm going to click once, click a second time, and I just created a viewport. Okay. So again, Paperspace and model space, you can think of them as two pieces of paper. Model space is sitting on your desk and you draw your drawings on it, and then you take your layout page and you lay it right over the top of your drawing page, okay? And then to view the drawings beneath, right, that Paperspace page, you have to cut a hole in it, and that's what the viewport does. You cut a hole in the paper to view the drawings beneath it, okay? Now, I'm going to create another viewport on this page, and I'm going to do it with my keyboard this time, all right? The keyboard shortcut for creating a viewport is MV, make view, right? MV, make view, enter. Click, click, enter. Click, click, enter. I'll do one more down here, click, click, and we've just created 1, 2, 3, 4 different viewports. Okay. Now I'm going to place one of these 4 objects in each of these different viewports. So we'll put the tree right here. We'll put this curb detail right here. We'll put the toilet down here, and we'll put this eave detail right here. Okay. Hopefully I remember that order. But the idea behind Paperspace is that I can arrange my drawings however I want on my page, and once they are arranged, I can then scale the viewports individually, okay? Again, that's important because different things need to be at different scales on one piece of paper, all right? So to engage a viewport, which I'm going to do next, engage mean even though I'm in Paperspace, I am allowed to engage model space through Paperspace by double-clicking in a viewport. So if I click very fast, you see that this outline gets very heavy, right? And now when I scroll and I move, you can see that I'm actually manipulating model space. Okay? And I need to do that so that I can get the drawing that's appropriate for the viewport in the right place. So I pan over, I get the drawing I want here pretty close to the middle. Click, click out. There we go. Click, click in, click, click out. There we go. I'm going to click, click, double click right there. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to get that detail into my viewport, and then I'm going to click, click out. Okay. I'm going to click, click in this viewport. I'm going to get my eave detail in view. Click, click out. Okay. This viewport is just a little bit too big, so I'm going to click on one of these grips at the bottom here. Right, another stretching method. I'm going to move it up just a little bit. Escape, escape. I'm going to make this one ever so slightly bigger. Okay. Now, I just about did something that is not really a no-no because when viewports print, we really don't see them. But just visually, I don't like doing it because I don't like to see lines crossing when they shouldn't be. But if I click on this viewport and I sort of drag it over the top of that tree and I hit escape, right? Visually that makes me crazy. I don't like to see those kinds of things. But if I were actually to print this page, it wouldn't really matter because these viewports are on the viewport layer and they're set not to print, right? So if they slightly overlap or they touch one another or one kind of overlaps another drawing to be able to fit everything, it's okay, all right? Really, the only rule you want to follow is that these viewports don't go beyond this dashed line on the piece of paper, which is a margin, right? If you happen to bring one of your viewports over the margin into this gray space, nothing terrible is going to happen, except when you print this, everything will shift over so that it fits on a page and won't look right. Okay, so we just want to make sure that we keep these right inside of that margin. All right. Okay, so last thing, I need to get into my lower viewport, and you notice I can still move, I can pan, I can zoom in, I can zoom out, right? I can even draw lines and different geometry on my Paperspace page, although it's going to be more for things like creating a view title or a title block, right? Not so much drawing, model geometry, okay? Whenever we want to draw something, we go to model space to draw it, okay? So I click, and now I've engaged model space again. I get my little toilet in here. I click out, and there we go. All right. If you ever get stuck in a viewport, every now and again this happens where somebody zooms so far in, they double click in their viewport and then they can't get out of it because they're so far zoomed in they can't kind of click off to the side of it, right? So if you ever get stuck inside of a viewport, you can type PS, enter at the command line, and PS stands for Paperspace, and I'm out of it. Okay, so there's a keyboard shortcut to get out of Paperspace. It's PS. All right, so I have my physical piece of paper. I have created these 4 different viewports, right? I put them on a non-printable viewport layer that I generated, okay? If I happen to put these or create these on a printable layer and I need to go back and change them, they're just like any other type of geometry where I can select it. I can go over to Home, and I can drop down and I could change it to viewport and it would change, okay? So even if you create it incorrectly, no problem there. All right, so everything looks really good. Now it's time for me to scale these objects, all right? The whole reason for Paperspace, to be able to lay these out in a nice cohesive layout so they make sense on the page, and then I need to scale them so that they're quantifiable, right? I can measure them on the page and know what size they are, all right? Pretty helpful for somebody who needs to build one of these because they can measure it and they can figure out how much materiality they need, right? Or how much materials they need, I guess I should say. There's 2 ways we can scale these viewports. I can select the viewport first of all, okay? So to scale a viewport, I have to select it. And when I select it, I get this little grip that pops up in the center. So this will allow me to scale an object, all right? But then also down here at the bottom, I have this little scale dialog or drop down that pops up. Okay, so if I click on that arrow, I see all of the different scales. All right. So the difference between scaling an object on the viewport and down here at the bottom, and let me just remind you that this option only pops up once you've selected a viewport. If I hit escape, do you see it goes away? Okay. So I select the viewport, it pops back up. Okay. The difference between scaling through the viewport here or using this is really what it does to the viewport itself. So if I come in here and I click on this down arrow and I pick something like 3/4 of an inch. Well, that was a good guess, wasn't it? We'll do 3/8 of an inch. Click. My viewport, when I scaled that direction, my viewport made itself smaller to accommodate the size of the actual scale of the object, okay? So this thing is a lot smaller when it's scaled at 3/8 of an inch is equal to a foot than it was originally showing, right? So the viewport kind of made itself smaller just so that it really surrounded that nicely, okay? I'm gonna hit undo, right? Now if I select that viewport and I come down here and I choose, let's see, let's do 3/4 or 3/8. The object zooms out, right, becomes smaller, and the viewport stays the same, okay? So I somewhat prefer selecting the viewport and coming down here to change the scale. I don't really like the viewport jumping and getting bigger and smaller according to scale, right? I lay my viewports out so that they look nicely on the page, and I just don't like them changing size when an object scales. So my personal preference, I come down here, I change the scale, but both ways are correct. You could do it either way, okay? One thing I just want to reiterate too that we talked about last time is how scaling objects actually functions in AutoCAD. Okay, so scaling works by zooming in and out in AutoCAD. All right. When we talked about scale factor, right, in AutoCAD, and let me just Google something really quick for everybody to notice. Scale factor AutoCAD. Okay. I'm going to come down here to Arch Toolbox. If you happen to forget what scale factor something is, here they all are, right? Here's our scale factor chart. But essentially, 1/4 of an inch, the scale factor is 48, okay? So what does that mean in AutoCAD? That means that AutoCAD zooms in 48 times in or out to achieve a scale. That's what the scale factor does. AutoCAD zooms in or out a factor of 48 times to achieve a 1/4 inch is equal to a foot scale factor, okay? So when you grab your viewport like this and you click on your scale and you say, let's make this 1/8 of an inch, you see it zoom out like that, right? AutoCAD is zooming in or out, and 1/8 of an inch is actually 96, right? A scale factor of 96. It's zooming in or out that many times, that factor, to achieve this scale, okay? So that's how scaling really works in AutoCAD. Now this scale is way too small and I'm getting some things around this object, so I'm going to rescale it so it's larger, but if I didn't want to and I really wanted it that small, I could crop out those objects just by moving the viewport, okay? I'm going to hit undo, and I'm going to grab this and come down here and change it to, let's do 1/2 inch. Much better, okay? So I can grab the viewport, scale it here. I can also scale it down here, okay? Let's scale a couple more of these. I can select this one, and I'm going to choose, let's choose 1/4 of an inch. That's a little bit small for me. And we're just doing this visually right now, okay? So you're just gonna kind of pick the scale that you feel best, works best. That looks pretty good to me. When you start working professionally, certain drawings have a specific scale assigned to them, right? So like a floor plan is generally going to be 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch. And a detail is generally going to be, 1.5 inches is equal to a foot, or 3 inches is equal to a foot, okay? But for today, for this assignment, we're just going to make these look the way we want them to. I'm going to double click in this viewport. I'm going to get this tree right in the center. I'm going to double click out, click on my viewport, and I'm going to scale it. Let's make this 1/4 of an inch is equal to a foot. That was a pretty good guess. Looks good. And we'll get our little toilet here. And I'm going to scale this now. Let's do 1 inch is equal to a foot. That looks good. It got cut off a little bit. So I could click on this viewport, M for move, enter. I could move it up ever so slightly. And then I could grab this and drag it out. Okay. Click, click. I could also move it if I needed to. Click, click out. And again, it doesn't really matter that these are crossing each other because they're not going to be printable. Although if it bothers you like it bothers me, you could just kind of make it a little bit neater. Okay. All right. So we've just set our layout up. Okay. We have our 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper. Number 1, we have created our viewports on the page and we put them on a non-printable layer, and then we have double clicked in each of those viewports to get the appropriate drawing and the appropriate viewport, and then we have scaled those objects. Okay, so in the next series of events will be to print this drawing. So if I control P now, okay, nothing really changes. There's just one setting that changes in here. So in the print dialog box now, you're still going to choose your PDF creator. Is everybody okay? Did everybody get Adobe PDF? Okay, good, okay. So we have Adobe PDF here. We have letter size, which is the size of the page, okay. Now we're going to choose layout as our plot area, what to plot. We don't need to choose window anymore because essentially we just want AutoCAD to print our layout, our paper space, okay? And that really consists of that digital piece of paper on the page or on our screen here. So I'm going to choose layout. That means, well, let me just say this. We could do layout or we could do extents. We don't want to do display and we don't want to do window. Layout, we'll just print this layout exactly as you have it, okay? What extents does is it will print the entire layout, but it will allow this option to become available, which is center the plot, okay? So center the plot allows AutoCAD to take all of these objects, and regardless of where they are on the page, it centers them, okay? So if you generally laid them out, but you didn't pay attention to if they were exactly in the middle of the page, you could use extents. If you have them exactly where you want them and you don't want them to move on the page, you can choose layout. So those are two acceptable what to plots. We're going to leave the scale alone now. This is going to be 1:1, all right? And this is different than model space, right? In model space, things are drawn very large, and so we have to choose the plot scale when we're printing from model space because things are very large and we need to physically scale them down. But in Paperspace, right? In Paperspace, we have already used these viewports and scaled the viewport. And so this physical piece of paper is 8.5 by 11 inches, which will come out of a printer, right? So we don't have to now scale these. We'll just leave it at a 1:1 scale. Do we want this landscape or portrait? You choose that. And then finally, just make sure you choose LaserJet CTB so we have black and white line weights. We're going to print preview and everything looks wonderful, right? If I hit print now, if I hit OK, this will create a PDF. So layout, PDF, enter. Looks wonderful, except it's turned sideways. We don't like that, right? Let's see. And so to change this to the right orientation, I'm going to come over here to organize. Where is it? There it is. I'm going to organize my pages and just turn it. Okay. Nothing makes people more cranky than when you send them a PDF that's not the right orientation. Especially a client that doesn't have Adobe and they can't rotate it, right? You think, oh, I sent the page over, I'm done. And then they email you and say, can you rotate that, please? Just do it so that they don't have to worry about that, right? Or you send it to your boss and they say, hey, that's great. Can you please rotate it so it's the right orientation? So just get used to the fact that you will have to print something and then you'll likely have to rotate it the correct way, okay? But now that we have our free Adobe, we can do that with no problem. Everything looks good. Let me show you what would have happened if I had forgotten to put these viewports on a non-printable layer, okay? If I had left them on the wall layer by accident and I'd hit Control P to print. Another little hint for printing, now that you guys hopefully can responsibly print. Up here under Page Setup, there is an option that says Previous Plot, and that will restore all of the plots from the print that you had just recently done. So I'm going to do Previous Plot to get all my settings back from the print I just created. I'm going to preview and look at how terrible that is, right? It looks terrible here, but of course, again, the main, not just that it looks terrible, but the main reason we don't want these to print is we don't want them to be mistaken for something, okay? You would really have no argument if a contractor came back and said, you know, there's this line all the way around the tree. It looked like a concrete pad to me, you know, and it was extra. Okay, so I'm going to grab these viewports. I'm going to drop this down and change it to viewport, and everything is the way it should be, okay? All right, any questions on any of that? All right, so how do we now create more pages that we can print, and how do we change the page size, right? Because you're not going to really want to print everything on an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper. In fact, you rarely print things on 8.5 by 11 inch pieces of paper. In fact, it's usually 11 by 17 or 24 by 36 or the ANSI sizes of those. So 22 by 34 or 11 by, or half size, which is 12 by 18, okay? So let's talk about all those things. So first thing, we have model space here. Again, model space is where we draw. I click on layout. Layout is Paperspae, which is now where we print. So how do we create a new layout? Well, because I like this 8.5 by 11, but I want it to create another page layout here. If I right click over layout, you see we have a lot of different options. So we have the ability to create a new layout. We have the ability to delete, rename, move or copy, page setup manager. We have a lot of things we can do here, okay? So if I click on new layout, you see a second tab is created, all right? This is gonna be something you'll do on your final project. There will be some other things that we'll be doing that are more complicated, but really you're going to have several pages to print, and you're going to have to create several different layouts for each of those, okay? So you can right click on it, but you also see this little plus sign here. Click new layout, all right? So I now have not just one page, but I have 2 and I have 3 pages, okay? So I can come to layout 1, I can click on it very slowly, right click, rename, and maybe we could call this something like detail page. Enter. And maybe this layout right here, right click, rename, we'll name this Eve detail. Enter. And maybe we'll click on layout 3 and right click, and we'll rename this tree and curb. Details. Enter. Okay. We'll leave our little toilet out of these details. But now we have 3 different pages, 3 different layouts, 3 different paper spaces happening here, okay? And on my first layout, my first paper space page, I have an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper with all 4 details on them. Great. What do we want to do on our second page here? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to change the page size, okay? I want to make this an 11 by 17. That's the first thing I want to do, okay? And then the third thing I want to do is I want to create kind of a setup so that I can just hit one button and the page size changes. I don't want to have to go through and set these up every single time. I want AutoCAD to allow me to create sort of a template for each of these page sizes. You know, hit the button and then it changes to the right size. Okay, so we're going to talk about that next. To change the page size it's really quite simple. I'm going to pretend like I'm printing. Okay. Control P. I'm going to set this up like I want to print Adobe PDF. And here, instead of letter, I'm going to choose 11 by 17. Okay, and right here where it says paper size, this is what's going to change the size of your page. 11 by 17. Okay, I'm going to choose layout here. That looks pretty good. Landscape. I'm going to change to LaserJet CTB. I'm just going to set this whole thing up as if I were going to print. I'm going to hit apply to layout. Okay. And I'm not actually going to hit OK to print. I'm going to hit cancel. And do you see my page size jumped? Right? So now it's a lot longer. So it's 17 inches by 11 tall. Okay. And I know that that happened not only because physically the page proportion is a different size, right? But I can now see that this viewport that was once filled the entire page is a lot smaller. Okay. So to change the page size, Control P, I'm going to choose the printer, choose the page size, layout, the orientation, and then LaserJet, hit apply to layout, and then cancel. Okay. And that does it. Now, out of all things printing, this is probably the most important step, is remembering to make your page the right size, okay? And the reason I say that is because what if I had laid this entire page out, and you know, this was fairly simple. We have 4 drawings. There's nothing much to it at this point. But when you're laying out pages professionally, you have annotation to worry about, you have a title block to worry about, you have view titles to worry about, you have the drawings themselves to worry about. So when you lay out a page, it may take you a couple of hours, okay? So if I was meaning to lay this out on an 11 by 17 or a larger size of page, and I forgot to change the page size, let's see what would happen here. Apply to layout. All of a sudden, that doesn't work. Right? So if I had laid this out on an 8.5 by 11 and then I go to print it as if it were an 11 by 17, this would happen and you panic. panic, and all of a sudden I start getting emails, right? My page is not working right. What is happening? Or, you know, so I'm always, the first thing I always say is, did you make your page the right size, right? So when I say that to you, did you make your page the right size? This is what I mean. Pretend to print, set the page, then lay it out, okay? So I'm gonna hit undo and just show you that one more time. So here's my 8.5 by 11, Control P. But in actuality, I wanted this to be an 11 by 17. Okay. And I get it. It's, you know, you're new at this and it's hard to remember. I've done the same thing. Okay. That one actually didn't shoot them off to the side, but still you can see it's not laid out properly, right? These could have been spread out a lot more on the page. They could have been at different scales. Things would have worked a whole lot differently had I changed the page size first, okay? So the first step when you're creating an actual page layout like this, which is called a sheet, right, is to set the page size. So step one, set the page size. And again, if you forget to do it, you saw what happened. So I go to my Eve detail down here. Here I am, Control P, Adobe, 11 by 17, layout, LaserJet, landscape, apply it, hit cancel, and here I am. Okay, now I'm ready to lay out this page. There's already a viewport on here. I'll just want to make sure it's on the viewport layer, which it looks like it is. And MV, enter, make view, enter. I'm just going to create another little viewport over here. We just want 2 drawings on this page. It's wonderful. Okay, click to engage. I bring the drawing I want in this viewport to view. Click out. Click in. I bring this drawing into view. Click out. I select my viewport. I can scale it here. Excuse me, or I can scale it here. Let's make this 1/4 of an inch. Excuse me. Way too small. Let's make that 1/2 of an inch. Looks a lot better. 3/4. Even better. Okay, so that's 3/4 of an inch is equal to a foot. Now, another question I always get is, how do I know if it's scaled, right? And is it correct if I scale it and then I scale it again? Because am I scaling a scaled object? And the answer is, number one, I know that it is or isn't scaled by selecting the viewport and looking down here at the bottom. If you see this decimal increment right here, it is unscaled. That is not correct, okay? So I click on it, I see that it is not scaled, it's incorrect. I use my drop down here. Let's choose 1/4 of an inch. Maybe we can make that a little bigger. Let's do 3/8. That looks pretty good, okay? So I just scaled it to 1/4 and then to 3/8, and it's correct. Every time you scale something in AutoCAD, it sort of resets itself to scale it properly, okay? So I'm not scaling a scaled object, which then throws the scale off. Even though I'm changing the scale, AutoCAD knows how much to zoom in or out to make that scale appropriate, okay, or correct. All right, so now I have my drawing. It looks wonderful. I Control P, and I just check everything. Looks good. I preview it. I always preview just to make sure my viewports don't print, right? I fall into that trap all the time. And I hit OK, and it's creating a PDF. Okay, so tree and Eve. Enter. It prints it to a PDF, but it's the wrong orientation. You send it to your boss, and they say, send it back and say, please rotate correct orientation. And I come over here to organize, and I do that, close, and everything looks great. Okay? All right. Let's create one more layout, this tree and curb details, and I want this to be an even larger page size. I want it to be a 24 by 36, which is also an arch size D, okay? So architectural page sizes have letters associated with them, right? So an arch A is a 9 by 12, an arch B is a 12 by 18, a C is 18 by 24, and a D is 24 by 36, okay? So paper sizes, good old Arch Toolbox. We love you, right? So we can see them all here, right? So letter, legal, tabloid, ledger, and then A through E1, okay? I very recently had somebody want to print an Arch E, which is 3 feet by 4 feet. It's a gigantic piece of paper, right? To be carrying around. And then we have the ANSI size, okay? So ANSI is going to be like 11 by 17 and 22 by 34, okay? But if you ever, if I say print 22 or print 24 by 36, okay? And you come over here and you do Control P and you change your printer just like you should. And then you get a page size and you're like, I don't see any numbers. I don't see sizes, right? Arch D, these all are associated with a page size, right? A physical page size. So just look it up and you'll be able to find it pretty easy. So Arch size D, layout, of course, leave this alone, landscape, LaserJet CTB. I'm going to hit apply to layout and cancel, and my page size jumped even more, right? Again, if you had laid this out before you jump the page size, you'd have to relay it out. Pain in the neck, waste of time, right? So we just lay it out correctly the first time, and we'll put a few of these drawings on here. So I'm going to MV, enter, click, click. There we go. Again, I could also come up here to layout if you're a button person, which you should be a keyboard person, but if you are a button person, you can click on rectangular, and let's add a few details here. So we'll do 1, we'll do 2, and we will do 3. Okay, now look at this, right? We see the drawings in here. If I go back over to model space and I add something else, oops. I'll give you some nightmares about your homework, right? Offset. There we go. Okay. If I add another drawing in there, I go back to my layout. Do you see how it updates? Okay. So we draw in model space, and anything that's drawn there is viewable in Paperspace using a viewport. So now I can click, and I can put my Eve detail here. Okay. Click over here. And I can put my circle if I need to. Click. Let's get my little tree. Click. Oh, but my tree, we can see that stuff, so I want to click on that and kind of crop that stuff out. Okay. Click. We'll bring our little toilet into view. Click out. Click. We'll bring our little curb detail into view. Click out. Okay. Looks wonderful. And let's scale these all now. One thing that we went over last time that we didn't go over this time is the fact that I can grab a couple of viewports at the same time, right? I can select 2 viewports, and I can come down here and I can scale these at the same time, right? So I could say 1/8 of an inch. Oop, no, that did not work out for me, did it? Let's do 1.5 inches is equal to a foot. There we go. Okay, so I can grab 2 viewports at the same time and scale them. I'm going to grab my tree, come down here. Ooh, 1/8 inch, a little too small. Let's do 3/16. Still too small. 1/4. Click out. Oh, sorry, escape. These all look really good. Okay. Lay out your pages so they're nice. Let me just say that, okay? I give this spiel maybe a little bit later in the semester as well, but when I look at somebody's drawings who's just a beginner, and let's say I don't know they're a beginner, right? But when I look at somebody's drawings, even, content aside, I can tell how much experience somebody has with AutoCAD or Revit or drafting by the way their drawings look, right? So making sure that things are somewhat lined up nice on the page, right? Vertically and horizontally, if it makes sense. And what do I mean by that? I mean that, this isn't kind of like way up here in the corner, and this isn't over here, right? And this isn't somewhat like that, okay? Take some time, make sure that your drawings look nice and neat, they're lined up as best as we can do, right? When I look at drawings and I see they're nicely composed, things are lined up, annotation is lined up, it's not jumbled, it's readable, right? Not only does it speak to your experience, but it speaks to, do you care about your drawings? Do they look nice, right? So I'll reinforce that idea when we actually start doing a little bit more architectural type layouts, but make sure things look nice, make sure they're lined up, make sure your viewports don't print, make sure you use LaserJet to print, right? All these things kind of add up to a nice looking drawing, okay? I'm seeing a little bit of stuff over here, but I think I'm going to scale this before I actually decide if I want to crop that out. So we'll do like 1 inch is equal to a foot. That looks pretty good. And up here we'll do 1 inch is equal to a foot as well. That looks pretty good, but I have some stuff over here, so I'm going to bring that in just a little bit. M for move, and just move it ever so slightly over so it's lined up. Okay. But now this is a 24 by 36 inch piece of paper. Let me just, again, I like to show you this because when you see the error, hopefully you don't do it, but if you do and you can connect what you see here with what you've done. But if I had actually made, then I thought, oh, I want to make this on 11 by 17, preview. Okay, nothing's there. What's happened? I don't know, right? I hit escape. Oh, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, what happened, right? You laid it out on a really big piece of paper, but then you went to print it on a smaller piece of paper. So that layout needs to be redone, right? There's no way of getting around it. So again, I can't emphasize enough, when you're going to print something, make sure you do it, you create the right page size in Paperspace first, okay? I'm gonna undo that, you undo, enter, and it's wonderful again. Okay, Control P, and I hit preview. We have something not printing. Okay, well, what do you think I did here? Exactly, yep. So I created this object on the viewport layer, right? There's a really good example of not correct drafting, right? So change it to whatever layer it needs to be, and then it updates on my layout here. Control P again, preview, and there it is, right? I hit escape, I hit OK, and we'll do this, 24 by 36 inch PDF, enter, and here it is. It's lovely. We're going to organize it to rotate it the right direction, close, and there we go. Okay. Okay, so one thing I want to make clear, and I assume you all know this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. These PDF files, it's a digital exchange file, so you can email this, you can post it on Google Drive or any FTP site for digital exchange, but you can also print these, right? I hope if you don't understand that, just know that. So I can hit Control P, and I can pick a physical printer now, right? Which ours is missing still from our room here. But we have, this is our room, or no, this is not our room. We're in 305. It's not connected. Anyway, so if I were to pick a physical printer, I could hit print and it would print out a physical piece of paper, okay? So this is a 24 by 36 inch piece of paper. So I can't obviously print it on a small printer, but I could plot it on our plotter, right? I could, with any of those other drawings I generated today, I could hit print and somebody could print it out of a printer and we get a physical piece of paper, okay? So not only are these digital prints, but they will print a physical piece of paper if you need to. All right, any questions so far on any of this? I have one more thing I want to talk about today, and I'm going to introduce a topic, and then we'll continue with that topic on Wednesday, okay? But one thing I do want to introduce you to is creating a page setup. All right, and I want to introduce you to creating some page setups because if you haven't noticed, number one, there's a few steps to getting your page size correct here and getting the print sets correct, right? Work that is likely identical on every page. That wouldn't it be nice if we could just set it up somewhere so when I want to create a page and I want it correct, I just hit the button and it sets everything. Wouldn't that be nice, right? And we can do that, okay? So if I right click on my tab here and I go to Page Setup Manager, okay, this is a place where I can add preset settings for pages, all right? What's nice about that is you think, oh, I need to create an 11 by 17 PDF. Well, we're going to set up a setting for an 11 by 17 PDF. So if you click on it and hit OK, it sets that page up correctly. All right. So you see the current page setups we have, and you'll also see we can click on New. And I like to give the name, it needs to be descriptive. So I like to say something like, 24 by 36 PDF. And I put PDF in there because, that is the printer, which is different than if you choose like a plotter or another physical printer to print this. So I hit OK. And AutoCAD is now going to ask me to define that page setup. Okay, so I'm going to choose Adobe PDF, 24 by 30. Oh, I misnamed it, didn't I? Well, good. I'll show you how to rename it. This is supposed to be 24 by 36. So we'll choose Arch Size D. And layout is fine. 1:1, that's good. Landscape. And then we'll choose LaserJet CTB. We're going to hit OK. And now that preset with that page setup with that name will apply all those settings to any page. We'll apply those settings to any page that you apply it to. Okay. So next I'm going to show you how to apply it. But before I do that, I'm going to hit Modify. Oh, it won't let me change it there. Let's see. Right click, rename. There we go. So 24 by 36. Okay. Close. Okay. So now I'm on this page that's 8.5 by 11. If I click on right click, page setup manager, I click on 24 by 36 PDF and I hit set current and close. You see it preset all those things. Okay, so I could do that with each of these, right? I can go right click, page setup manager, 24 by 36 PDF, set current, close, right? So it's really nice when you have 30 different pages that you're doing and you don't want to have to hit Control P, set the plotter, blah, 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 right? You just want to come in here and apply this, all right? Another way we can apply this is I can Control P, and it's now going to appear in my drop down here, which is even easier, right? So I can choose 24 by 36 PDF and hit Apply to Layout, right? I could hit OK to print, or I could hit Cancel, and then I could lay out my page, okay? So I think for now, likely right click, page setup manager. Probably the most common you're going to be using are going to be 24 by 36 PDF, 11 by 17 PDF, and 8.5 by 11 PDF. Those are going to be the three that you're going to be using the most. So I think for your assignment here and then moving forward, because now that we know how to print in Paperspace, you're going to be required to do it, okay? So moving forward, it would be nice for you to open up that template file that you generated and to add these page setups to that, right? So that when you start a brand new assignment now, that can be built into your template file. Does that make sense to everybody? A little bit? Okay. All right, so let me just, maybe how to do that. I'm going to open up. 1 second, let's see, open. I saw it in my recent files there. Open. Maybe not. There it is. You see at the bottom there it says SB 2019 DWT. Remember that assignment, the template file assignment? If you've saved your template file somewhere, you can reopen it, right, to edit it. So if this is saved at home on your computer somewhere, you can reopen that template file and you could add layers or whatever. You could also come down here, right click and choose page setup. Oh, I'm not on layout. Page setup manager, new, 24 by 36 PDF. Enter. There's my PDF, Arch D, layout, looks good. Okay, hit OK, close. All right, and now when I hit Control S, it saves that setting into my template file so that next time AutoCAD opens with that template file that it remembers that, okay? Okay, I'm gonna hit undo on a few of these so that they're not all skewed and weird. But I'm just going to quickly reiterate, right? In model space, we draw. So this is where all of our drawing goes. And I could draw, 50 different drawings all over here. And the nice thing about Paperspace that we now know is that even if I have 50 different drawings in one model space, I can lay those out on a page at different scales and print them using Paperspace. Okay, so model space we draw, Paperspace we print. We access model space through Paperspace using viewports. Okay, to create a viewport, it's MV, make view, or we go to layout and you can choose whatever shape of viewport you want here. Okay, those viewports need to be generated or put onto a new layer called viewport that is set to not print. Okay, and we're going to put all of those viewports onto the physical, this digital piece of paper that we see on our screen here that does have a physical size. So the first thing that we do when we lay out a page, we set our page size, we put our viewports on the page, we then scale our viewports, we make sure our viewports are on a non-printable layer, and then we print them to PDF, right? If we print it to PDF and the page is the wrong orientation, we use the organize command inside of Adobe to rotate it, okay? One thing I do want to say, and you likely all know this, but if I had accidentally printed something, so for example, let's go back to, here we go, is our 24 by 36. If I had accidentally printed something and maybe one of my viewports for whatever reason had printed, okay, Control P, I'm gonna hit preview, and I didn't catch it because it was very light, and I hit OK, and I printed this and I gave it a name, viewport, and then once it printed and I had rotated it, right, I look at it and I say, oh dang it, look at that, that looks terrible, right? I can close out that page and I can reprint. I can make the edit, right? I can change that viewport to be on the viewport layer. Control P, and I can reprint this and resave over the top of that file. Viewport, save. Would you like to replace it? Yes, right? And now it's gone, okay? So if you happen to make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can always go back in, make the edit, and then reprint over the top of it, okay? All right, final thing today that we're going to talk about. Does anybody have any questions before we just introduce the next topic and then we'll be done? Okay. So the final thing that we have to talk about is going to be annotation. And when I say the word annotation, I mean things like dimension and text and leaders like this that describe things on the screen, all right? It doesn't matter if you're generating an eave detail like this or a piece of, a widget or whatever, something mechanical, nuts and bolts mechanical that you're laser cutting or printing out schematic drawings for, right? It doesn't matter what it is. You're likely going to draw something in AutoCAD someday, and you're likely going to have to dimension it or put a piece of text or a leader on it to describe what it is, okay? And that text needs to be readable when you print it, all right? So AutoCAD, using Paperspace with AutoCAD, there's a system called annotative text that will allow you to create dimensions and text and leaders in model space and then have them be the right size regardless of the scale that you print them at in Paperspace. Right? And you're probably thinking, well, is there an issue there? Right? Shouldn't we just create text and it's all the right size? And the answer is, ideally you should be able to, but the real answer is no, okay? So let me show you. I'm going to move this tree right here. And I'm going to move this toilet right here, okay? And I'm going to create this layout so it's a lot bigger. And same thing here. And I'm going to put the only detail that we actually have with kind of some text into one side. And I'm going to put the same thing over here on this side. Okay. And what we're going to learn about next time is how to make this text size readable in the same size regardless of what scale we print it at. So that means if I take this and I change it to 1 inch is equal to a foot, and then I take this one and I change it to a 1/16 of an inch. Oh, too small, way too small. I meant to show you, but not that small, 3/16. Okay. That is quite small, right? But the idea is still there. I want this text to be readable, whether it's the detail is this size or the detail is this size, okay? And so AutoCAD has a system in place called annotative text where that will happen, right? So this is an extreme case. It's more likely, gonna be not that extreme. So let's see, something like, that's still extreme, honestly, but a little bit more what I'm looking for, okay? So in an ideal world, when I print something, I want the text to be readable regardless, and I want it to be the same size on the page, regardless of what scale I put it at, okay? And something maybe that you hadn't quite thought about, let's see if we can find a page with a few details. Architectural detail sheet. Here's a good example. Let's see if we can find one of these that we can look at a little closer. Oh, see, it's a big topic. Drawing alignment and notes. I'm not the only one, right? Okay. So I think I saved that on my desktop there. Okay. Maybe not. Under Revit customization, of course. Here we go. Let's look at this. Here we go. Okay. So when I look at this, right, these might be pretty similar. Oh, it's not even reading. Anyway, when you start working professionally, right, you'll have a lot of details and they will all be on the same page. And you can see here, this might be smaller and this might be larger, but the idea is that the text, even though we really can't read it right here because of this poor image, the text you can see is still the same height, right? So this is 3 inches is equal to a foot. It looks like they're all similar, which is good. But if one had to be 1.5 inches is equal to a foot instead of 3 inches, you'd still want them because they're on the same page. You want the text and the annotation to read uniformly, okay? And that was used to be quite hard to achieve in AutoCAD, and over the years they've made a lot of improvements, and one of those is annotative text, which allows that to happen, okay? So when we come back together on Wednesday, we'll talk about how, although these viewports can be at 2 separate scales, okay, we will still have text that looks uniform on the same page, okay? All right. Any final questions? Okay, so I'm going to post your assignment, and I'll leave this video here, and I will just put a warning on here that says, hey, this one doesn't have text because it was a mistake, obviously. So I'll just leave it there in case you wanted to view something. But I will post our new video from today on here as well. And you will have an assignment that you have to do, and you will have a discussion post that you have to do called the hardest part. Okay, so I'll post those 2 today. And then when we come back on Wednesday, we'll talk about text, which will also lead into annotative settings in AutoCAD. Okay? All right.